Echo Lima Romeo departs VFR on course, fly runway heading, departure frequency 119.
Hi, I'm Tyler, and I'm the founder of Noble Flight Simulation. We take pride in offering the most realistic Cirrus hardware on the market, and in this short video, we're going to show you how to get your unit set up and ready to fly. The first step in assembly is to bolt together the left and right halves of the panel mount. To do this, you're going to need 3 Phillips head screws and 2 washers. For the bottom 2 holes, you're going to use the Phillips screw with the washer. And for the top hole, you're only going to use the screw. And this is to allow clearance for the center trim button cover in a later step. Tighten all the screws snugly, but obviously don't over tighten. Next, we're going to screw on the auxiliary switch panel. This step is also done with Phillips head screws and 2 washers. Notice that the holes for the auxiliary switch panel are slightly oblong. That's so that the the auxiliary panel can be adjusted slightly up or down to make sure that the rubber feet on the audio panel are resting flush on the table. So pay attention to the way that the ribbon cable is folded so that you pass that underneath the panel mount. Using the screw with washer, Phillips head screw with a washer. Get it started by hand on both sides. And then making sure the rubber feet of the panel mount are firm on your surface. Adjust the height of the auxiliary switch panel so that all 6 of the feet are resting securely on the tabletop. And then once that is the case, go ahead and tighten up the screws. The GCU comes pre-mounted in the GCU panel mount. To mount that, you're going to use 2 additional Phillips head screws. You're going to route the cables underneath the panel through the cutout. If you position the unit at the edge of the table, you're going to start these screws by hand. You're going to leave them loose. And then you're going to take the cable clip The cable clip has slots in the back that will just slide over the screw head. And after that's in place, then you can tighten it down. Make sure that the cable is well out of the way and that it doesn't get pinched underneath the screw head, as this will cause damage to it. Using either a 2mm or a 5/64 inch hex wrench, you're going to remove the 4 corner screws on both the MFD and the PFD so that the metal back can be removed. Make sure you place those screws in a safe location because we will be using them in the next couple steps. Place the MFD and the PFD bezel into the respective cutout, and you're going to stabilize it in the bezel with the central screw that screws into the bezel. You are going to use a 3/8 inch hex socket screw, which is slightly shorter than the screw that you took out in the previous step. You're going to just tighten this a little bit, not all the way, to allow for adjustment later. After you get 1/2 in, doesn't matter whether you do the MFD or the PFD, you're going to take the center trim piece and you're going to put it in place. And take the other half and do the same thing. Once you adjust the gaps on the center trim so that they're all symmetric and equal, you can tighten the central bolts or the center socket screws down. And then the two on the end. To connect the cables in the back, start first with the PFD LCD power cable. I usually like to route this underneath the mounting plate just to keep it clean, and there's only one way that it can plug in. Next, unplug the cable on the board side of the MFD and plug in the auxiliary panel. Again, this can only go one way. Then you can plug in the two cables for the GCU. As you're putting counter pressure on this, make sure you do not push on the screen itself. Place your hand on the plastic bezels or on the metal panel. This is a good time to point out there's a green header right here that you can hook up a potentiometer. We usually use a 50K potentiometer, and if you hook it up to this green header with the wiper in the middle, then that will allow you to dim the backlighting as you would in the actual aircraft itself with the instrument light brightness. Next, plug the MFD cable back in. And lastly, plug in the PFD. For the PFD cable, if you would like, you can put a parallelogram fold in that so that the cable sits nicely. There's a 2-pin cable that goes to the backup button. However, we're not going to plug that in just yet, because next we need to get the sheet metal backs, and you're going to get the screws that you used or that you took out in the earlier step. Simply put it in place, make sure the cables go where they're supposed to go. I usually start with the MFD, or the PFD rather. And if any of the screws don't seem like they want to go, usually what you need to do is slightly loosen the center screw that's holding the bezel into the panel. That'll allow the bezel to float just a little bit so that the screws will all line up nicely. You can tighten all those down. All right. Now when you put the back on the MFD, there's a small hole on the side that you need to pass that cable through. And then you secure that back in place. Again, making sure all the cables are not getting pinched. Then you can plug in the cable to the back of the display backup button. The polarity does not matter. Doesn't matter how you plug that in. And then the last step of the assembly is the button cover that goes right over the top. And you're going to hold this in place with 4 Phillips head screws with a washer. To help with final connections, the Cirrus Perspective unit is designed to stand up on its side with the Gcu Panel Mount acting as a kickstand. On the bottom of the MFD, you have the video input with the video power supply, which is a 5.5 plug. You have the micro USB cable with the 3.5 millimeter DC plug. And on the PFD, you have the video input and another 5.5 millimeter DC power supply. The unit comes with 2 right angle video adapters so that the cables are able to go directly out of the back. So you can connect those. And we do recommend that when you are plugging in the cables, to avoid excessive torque on the circuit boards, maintain pressure behind the cable as you're pushing it in, instead of just pushing it straight in like that, because sometimes there is a little bit of force required to get that to seat all the way. The last thing, and this is very important, the micro USB header can be damaged if the cable gets torqued. So if you forget to unplug the cables and try to move the unit. So what we recommend is take a cable tie, to tether the cable to the cable clip here. And if you forget to unplug it, that'll act as a stress reliever so that it does not cover or does not torque on that cable. After you have all of your connections made, make sure that the USB cable is plugged in, and when you plug the USB cable in, the backlighting should illuminate. To turn the LCD screens on, the USB cable has to be plugged in, and on the bottom left of both displays there's a flush button that serves as both the auto configuration button and the power button. To turn on the power, push and hold the button and the screen will come on. Do this for both. Now, by far the most beneficial thing of our software is how little configuration is actually required in order to get it to work properly. You don't have to pop out, resize, and drag your screens. You don't have to modify any configuration files. Basically, all you do is you run this setup program. You open the program, the MFD and the PFD screen images maximized to the appropriate monitor, and you're good to go. However, in order for the software to know which monitor is your MFD and which one is your PFD, we have to delineate that within the Windows environment. So to do that, if you right-click anywhere on your desktop, you're going to go into your video card settings, and I have an NVIDIA video card, as many of you will as well. And when that opens, the first thing you need to do is to make sure that the resolution for your MFD and PFD displays are set appropriately. Now, the native resolution for the G1000 is 1024 by 768. Now, you'll see all the different monitors that are connected to your computer up here. Sometimes Windows will name these different things. Sometimes it'll have different icons. That really doesn't matter. Just make sure that you're adjusting the right ones for your MFD and your PFD. You want them to be set to 1024 by 768 with a refresh rate of 70 Hertz. Now you can set your other displays whatever you want, but make sure that the MFD and the PFD are set appropriately. So for these two, that's what we're set at. After you set the resolution, if you go down here to set up multiple displays, this is where you tell Windows how your displays are oriented. Now, number 2 is my main display, number 3 is my PFD, and number 1 is my MFD. Now, these numbers don't matter. Those are just random numbers that get assigned when you plug in the monitor. What does matter, however, is the positioning of them. Now, to figure out which screen is which, if you right-click, and I'm going to show you here on the primary display so that you can see, if you right-click and hit Identify, it's going to pop up with a number. So if you do that down on these other screens, if I click this, so number 3 just popped up on my PFD. So, okay, I know that the PFD is number 3. So the first time you do this, your monitors might be oriented something like that. So what we recommend, just to make it easier as far as navigation, so you know where your mouse goes. So, you know, the mouse go down to the bottom right, and the mouse goes to your MFD, you go down to the bottom left, and your mouse goes to your PFD. It just keeps everything easy. But the most important thing as far as our software is concerned is to make sure that the PFD is on the left and the MFD is on the right. And as long as you do that, when you start our software, everything will maximize to full screen and it goes to the appropriate screen. So after you get these set up, hit Apply, and you're good to go. From time to time, the picture can be not centered perfectly within the screen. And so to demonstrate that, we can load our G1000 software. And if we zoom in, you can see that, for example, on the PFD here, the numbers are a little bit out of the bezel. So to fix that, using the auto adjust button, so pushing the flush button here once, and you'll see that now everything is nicely situated in the frame.